Welcome back to the IDP Plus Trends Show with Johnny Freakin Fantasy and at Average Joe's underscore FF. If you aren't following me already, go ahead and follow me at Johnny Freak in F1. Steve is at AVG Joe's underscore FF. Steve, how are you tonight?
I'm good. We got another good episode to talk about some fun free agency stuff.
And I'll tell you what, our last pod was a week ago. There have been numerous moves, an insane, amount of moves, and really juicy ones too. Fruitful landing spots for a lot of these guys, which wants to segment into our viewers and listeners that we are just going to talk about offense on this podcast. We will save defense IDP for the next podcast because there's going to be a lot of moves happening from here to the next time we get together. So right now, we're thinking that a lot of these big names have come up off the board, gone to their landing spots on offense. So over the next week, we're going to see what happens with IDP on the defensive side of free agency, and then we're going to address that next week. So some parameters for tonight's podcast: we are talking about free agent signings, no re-signs. We're not going to talk about Baker Mayfield because he got re-signed at Tampa Bay. We were just talking free agents who got signed elsewhere. They switched jerseys, in other words. So we're going to talk about offensive quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and a few tight ends for you tonight. Before we get started, I wanted to mention we are working for the IDP Plus network. If you haven't subscribed already, take this opportunity after listening with us and go to idpplus.com and sign up for a 1 month. Your first month will be only $1 when you sign up for 1 month subscription when you use the promo code mock draft. So once again, go to idpplus.com. When you subscribe for that 1 month access, 1 month subscription, use the promo code mock draft and you will get that first month for only $1. So before we go into our quarterback, Steve, I wanted to ask you, man, there's been some big splashes. What's one thing that you're taking away from this free agency and one thing that's on your mind, one takeaway that has surprised you so far?
I guess, you're looking at all these teams that are going into this season. Some had plenty of money in their cap space and they're using it, right? They're spending it. I will give credit to the Houston Texans. I think that is the biggest team as far as a winner so far. They had plenty of money. They've got some nice draft picks, and they are making smart decisions signing up these players that are going to make huge impacts. So they're just absolutely crushing it. I hate to see it as a Dallas Cowboy fan, seeing Houston starting to succeed and do really well, but they've done an amazing job. That team it's going to be hard to root against them. And they're going to be tough to play against. I am super excited to see what they're going to look like in 2024.
I agree, man. 3 teams that have shocked me is number one, you said it already, Houston Texans, Chicago Bears, and my hometown, Pittsburgh Steelers, man. They've had some great signings so far. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens on the back end of free agency and what moves they continue to make. Absolutely, man. It's a very fluid year. I don't remember a free agency frenzy like this. So a lot of shakeups. We're going to start with our quarterbacks and talk about some quarterbacks who have changed teams and what that means for their fantasy outlook, I should say. So we have some big signings here. We'll just glance over these. Russell Wilson's going to Pittsburgh, 35 years old, 1 year deal. I'm excited for this one. Russell Wilson, I think, is going to help the Pittsburgh Steelers transform from more of a run first team to a more balanced offense. I'm looking forward to see who the Steelers sign. I know they got Van Jefferson and they still have Pickens, but I'm looking to see who else they get, maybe upcoming at the draft or continuing with free agency. But Russell Wilson, really nice quarterback get for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then we got Kirk Cousins from Atlanta, 35 years old on a 4-year deal. And also Jacoby Brissett from New England, kind of going at 31 years old. Maybe a backup, but it might be a solid backup for Deshaun Watson, with a lot of injuries there and a lot of sour taste in our mouth with Deshaun Watson. Steve, what do you think about Wilson, Cousins, and Brissett?
The big win, I think, is going to be obviously Russell Wilson. I think it's good for him. I think it's good for Pittsburgh. That team has always been really good, but kind of, with the whole Pickett situation, moving on from him was a big deal. I know Kirk Cousins is like the hot one, right? Like, man, you got a quarterback that was great in fantasy, He, will sling it down the field. You now just opened up this offense with these weapons. I think the ones who benefit obviously will be Drake London, will be Bijan, Kyle Pitts, some of the other moves that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think Cousins benefits his players more than it benefits him. So for me, it's a good signing. I don't think it was the best signing for him, but I do love what this has brought to the rest of this Atlanta offense, especially when it comes to a fantasy aspect, because man, some of those players are going to be great. I will warn you with this though. I've seen a lot of startups, and I'm seeing some of these players, Pitts, Drake London, going a lot higher than they had ever before done. And I do have some caution with that. So just be careful, where these guys may land in your startups, if you're doing some startups, or of course, when redraft season comes around the corner before you know it, they might be a little more expensive than you thought. So just be careful with that.
Absolutely. And that's a good point. I mean, a lot of guys that we had on this list, we were talking, at one point it was Mac Hollins, who we thought was going to be, a name that we were talking about. Now we see other guys get signed too. So this is just a free agency at this point in time. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still a lot of moves to be made, and, rookie draft coming up, the NFL draft. So we'll see what moves we're going to, what moves will be great and what moves will be just decent, depth moves. But yeah, absolutely. That's a good name. Another guy, Sam Howell. He went from Washington to Seattle. I'm not going to spend much time on Sam Howell, but myself, I just want to say I rostered him in a dynasty league, and I was hoping that, I don't think he got a fair shake this year in Washington, and I was hoping that he'd get a change of scenery. Doesn't mean he's going to get the keys to the car right away and take over the offense. They still have Geno Smith, but preach patience if you have Sam Howell. Hopefully you didn't drop him. Hopefully you weren't bad taste in your mouth where you went and dropped him. He's still a fine hold for right now, just not somebody who's going to make the biggest headlines. But it's nice to see him get a different change of scenery there in Seattle. How about Gardner Minshew? I think this is a move that's kind of being overlooked right now. Gardner Minshew, I think he had a great, when we looked at him at Jacksonville, I thought he had a great year there. I was very surprised that he was reluctant to get a contract and a job. Then he landed on his feet with Indianapolis, and he had a great year by my standards with Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman really didn't, lose any ground when Richardson went down in week 2. Gardner Minshew picked it up. Only 27 years old. This is a 2-year contract. I think that Gardner Minshew is brought in here to start. Steve, is that the assumption you get too?
Yeah, there's a good chance. I mean, he made his first Pro Bowl. I know that means nothing to most people nowadays, but he made his first Pro Bowl last season in Indy. There's something magical about Gardner Minshew. I know he's like a guy that you just feel like he's not a starter, but then he gets the opportunities and he plays really well and he takes advantage of it. And you just feel like you have to root for this guy. Like I love watching him play. I love the way he plays. Now he's going to, Las Vegas that, yeah, they said Aiden O'Connell was their guy, but signing this decently sized contract to Gardner Minshew, I think that's not the full truth. I think they're actually brought in Gardner to, one, I think mentor O'Connell, but two, I think to actually give Minshew the chance to possibly end up becoming the starter, because there's something about him, that moxie, just the way he plays. Maybe it's the next Baker Mayfield. Maybe he gets into a nice scene and you've got a great weapon in Devontae Adams. They could draft, I've seen mock drafts of Brian Thomas from LSU going there. Another good receiver, Michael Mayer, now in his second year at the tight end position. So it's not like he lacks receivers. You can't forget Jacoby Myers. Like there are some options for him, right? So I like the Gardner Minshew move. I had Gardner Minshew in a couple of my dynasties last year, kind of picked him off waivers because I needed a starter. And he did really well for me when I needed him. And I'm not letting him go. I'm holding on to him. And you could possibly pick him off waivers right now. You probably find him there. And he's definitely worth someone to stash, especially if you're in a deeper league.
I agree, man. I tell you what, if I have O'Donnell on my team as a quarterback, I'm a little bit scared. I'm sweating. I'm not recommending this guy as a drop or anything like that. But yeah, it's tough to recommend him as a buy at the same time. Gardner Minshew, I really think he comes in here, and whether it's his job or not right now, I think he's going to earn it. So Gardner Minshew's good signing there. I felt like the Steelers should have got him a few years ago, but that's water under the bridge now. Another quarterback signing that's kind of going underappreciated right now, under the radar, is Sam Darnold to Minnesota. He's only 26 years old. When he was the backup in the preseason last year for San Fran, I know there was a lot of talk about him if he ever gets a chance, if he's ever needed. I mean, at one point, I remember people saying that Sam Darnold might take over Purdy's job. They thought that Purdy was going to fizzle and Sam Darnold was a late bloomer. He's still, like I said, 26 years old, and I do like him as potentially a backup. I'm not sure if I'm sold on him in Minnesota. Now, it does help him that he has great receivers around him for at least right now. We know Justin Jefferson's a little bit irked on the way that free agency has gone for them. But Sam Darnold, do you think that he can come in there and hold it down? Or do you think that, they're going to – I mean, on one hand, last year they had so many guys that came in, Dobbs, they had Mullins, they came in and did well. So I have a vote of confidence in Sam Darnold. But do you think that he can be a solid quarterback and maybe get a contract after that? Or is this really a stopgap, worst case scenario for the Vikings?
Yeah, I think expectation is because Minnesota traded to get Houston's 23rd pick overall, which now means they have 2 first-rounders for this season, and there's a good chance they trade those first to move up to get their rookie quarterback for the future. So right now, currently, Sam Darnold is kind of the stopgap. You paid him $10 million, so my expectation is he's starting this season to mentor and be the starter for whoever they end up drafting. And, he has the opportunity. You've got a great receiver in Justin Jefferson. You've got a good receiver in Jordan Addison. You got TJ Hawkinson. You now grabbed Aaron Jones, who has been a phenomenal receiving back. So there's no reason for Sam Darnold not to have success. Like, he's in a better position than he was when he was in New York. He learned a lot, I think, behind Purdy and having Shanahan as his coach last season. And they had high praise on him. They thought he did amazing, that he looked great. And sometimes let's be honest, sometimes there's these quarterbacks who just don't get a fair share and they look really bad. And then they go to a new home. They got a coach that supports them and puts them in position to win, and they do a great job. So I think this is a good move for Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's definitely somebody you may get at a cheap cost, a third, maybe a 4th round if you have 4th round rookie picks to grab. He's not going to cost you a lot. And if he doesn't turn out to do anything this season, okay, you lost the 3rd round pick. A lot of times that's a hit or miss pick anyway. So he's definitely worth somebody. I'm going to throw a 3rd out there, grab him, put him on my bench for right now, see what ends up happening, because the expectation is Vikings go get a rookie. Probably don't start the rookie, put Sam Darnold in, and he may shine and just look amazing. Right. And then, like you mentioned, his age, he's still fairly young. He's got to prove it. So I like this move for him for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did mention how there was praise for Sam Darnold. And last year, Nick Mullins, I think he came in and had over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns in a game. I mean, he was just a guy to me. So maybe Sam Darnold being a more experienced backup, maybe he comes in and sparks it off. So it's definitely a high potential there with Sam Darnold. I think he can, get it done at least for 1 year. Interested to see how that plays out, but that's going to wrap up our quarterback talk right now. We're going to move into wide receivers, and man, we've had some big moves here. Not as much as the next segment, the next position is the running backs, but for wide receivers, we had some trades. Three players who were traded. The first being Jerry Jeudy. He got traded from Denver to Cleveland. He's still young, man, 24 years old. I feel like he should be older than that. He's been in the league for a few years. Jerry Jeudy, I'll give you a personal caveat for me is I was never sold on this guy. I just don't know, really, I don't watch him much rookie, college ball. But Jerry Jeudy, for some reason, I just really doubted this guy coming in. And, a lot of people I've played with, they've really been shocked. You like the younger guys. Why don't you like Jeudy? I didn't like the system there in Denver. There was a lot of guys at the time, even Hamilton. They had Cortland Sutton. They had Tim Patrick too. So, maybe there are better days in for Jerry Jeudy moving to Cleveland, but I just don't see it. I'm still doubting him. To me, he's got to prove it. Jerry Jeudy, I don't really think there was much success from the number 2 wide receiver this year, and Elijah Moore or other guys maybe pitched in a little bit. But in Cleveland, I just don't think it's a fruitful landing spot for him. I'm a big downer on Deshaun Watson myself. So Jerry Jeudy, a lot of people expect him to maybe be an equal to or step up above Amari Cooper. And I just don't think that's the case right now, at least. I mean, maybe if we're talking over 3 or 4 years, decline starts to set in for Amari Cooper, but he's only 30 himself. He's not hanging on by a thread. So as much as, you sometimes you see players get cut and find grass is greener. I just don't think this is the case. I'm actually about just where I was, if he was in Denver right now. I don't move him up the rankings at all. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, Jeudy's not a move I'm going after. I could use him as trade bait right now, just because some people may think this is a good move for him, going from Denver, getting new scenery. You got Deshaun there. Like you, I don't believe in Deshaun at this point. He has not proven anything, and until otherwise, I'm not believing it. Right? He's got the injuries. It's a whole lot. So, yeah, Jeudy's not anybody I have any value for. Amari Cooper is still Amari Cooper. I think he's a top 20 receiver. I do hate that this kind of affects Elijah Moore. I kind of was a little high on him. I think he showed some promise going from New York to there. He still got great value in Njoku. And then as long as Chubb comes back, let's be honest, they're still going to run the ball like crazy. So you got him and four. I mean, I don't know, Jeudy. We'll see. He's more of a wait and see than anything else, but I'm not putting any high picks for him. I'm not going to draft him early and redraft. He is definitely somebody I'm going to wait and see, and just you can have him.
Right. Absolutely. Jerry Jeudy, still young though. Like I said, 24 years old. Maybe there's greener days ahead, but wait and see for sure. Definitely not a go and get right now. And if you have him, trade him. I agree with that. How about Diontae Johnson? Leaves Pittsburgh. A lot of people didn't like him in Pittsburgh. They called him like a bad, bad juju, bad personality in the locker room. I mean, I'm not there to say, whether he was or not, but what I do know about Diontae Johnson is he was in a rough spot here in Pittsburgh. Bad quarterback with Pickett, run first offense. He also had some guys here who, he couldn't really break away from. And I don't know if he's a number one receiver. I'll preface it by that. They had Pickens and Diontae Johnson. It just felt like somebody had to move, addition by subtraction. So Diontae Johnson, yeah, he's 27 years old, got some prime years left in the tank, and I like this for Carolina. I think he's a great kid there. I don't see him, moving up the ranks too much, pushing the needle to be a WR1. I just don't see it. I don't think he's a big volume receiver. But what I do know about Diontae Johnson is because, he's playing for Carolina and the team's going to be, we're assuming to be down, often, losing often. He is going to get more targets. He is going to get attention there. So Diontae Johnson, I do think he's a good signing. He is able to get open. That's one thing he does really well. And hopefully just by getting more targets, I think his value does come up a little bit. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. So I love this play for Diontae, and I love this play for Bryce Young in Carolina. You had an Adam Thielen last year who was up there in age, obviously couldn't get open, but there were sparks. He had games that he was wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, a few times last season. We're talking a receiver that was never a true one on his team ever, really. So now you add someone who's a little bit younger, someone who's a great route runner. One thing I'm sure you've seen it. Deontay's can separate himself from a cornerback or a safety and get open. Like he can do that on his own. He doesn't need to be moved around in motion or anything like that. So now you've got somebody who can actually create separation to be open for Bryce Young to throw to. And I think that's huge. And I don't know if he's quite a wide receiver 1, but I think he's going to get force fed like a wide receiver 1. I think he's going to see plenty of targets to increase his value where he could squeak into the top 20. Like I think he could have a high wide receiver 2 value this upcoming season if he just fed the opportunities. And this, you're talking a new offensive, perspective. You've got the Bucks OC coming over, to Carolina. So the whole offense is going to change. I love this move for Diontae. If you have him on your team, I think I'm glad you probably didn't let go of him. And I actually, on the backside, I think this is a great move for Pickens. I think letting Pickens now become the clear wide receiver 1 for Pittsburgh is a good thing. Like, I think it's great for both players. I think it's needed, and I think it's a benefit for both of them.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to say too about Diontae Johnson is that I do like Jonathan Mingo there, and I preached on Twitter. I was telling people, hey, stay patient with this guy. After the bye week, we see a lot of rookies pick it up. That wasn't the case at all. I was dead wrong there with Mingo. I wasn't the only one, but don't forget about him too. As much as there is room for him to get Diontae Johnson to get his targets. If Mingo steps up, right, if Thielen continues to have success like he did that first half of the season, maybe that clouds things for Johnson. But yeah, I agree. He's definitely going to get more targets. They're definitely going to be throwing more. Maybe Bryce Young gets better too. We're expecting that in his second year. How could it get any worse, right? So Diontae Johnson, I do see him coming up. But yeah, good point. I don't think he's a true Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, go up and get the ball, wide receiver. But if you can get open, it's more than half the battle, right? So those intermediate routes, I think, is where Diontae Johnson's going to excel. Our next player we're going to talk about who got traded, it was Keenan Allen. He got traded to Chicago. He's 31 years old. I think this was a great move by Chicago. Again, like I mentioned, a team who did really well in free agency. I think they really are giving the best they can, to bring good skill players to that offense. A lot of people were down on Chicago's offense, whether it be Fields or the wide receivers weren't showing up. They couldn't get the ball really moving that well. They really hit it all, right? They got a wide receiver here with Keenan Allen. They got a running back with Swift. So they're really addressing all those positions. And while it kind of muddies things up for a fantasy perspective, I just don't think Keenan Allen is somebody who's going to get faded. I really think that he's a solid number 2 receiver. I don't see him, at this point at 31 years old, being better than DJ Moore. I don't think many do, but Keenan Allen, I think this was a great get. Probably I'm going to say just because of how torrid he was doing last year, I don't think you can expect that at 31, learning a new offense. We'll see what happens with the quarterback system too, the situation at quarterback. But yeah, Keenan Allen, I think this is a good get. Maybe he doesn't have as much attention on him, because if he would have stayed in the Chargers, with how bad their offense is right now, I don't see a reason why you just don't double him all day. So maybe going to Chicago, he can shed some light, get loose, gets opposite side of DJ Moore, find more open space. And he's a great route runner himself, still at 31 years old. So I'm about the same. I think the stock's about the same with me with Keenan Allen. I really don't see how going from a number 1 to a number 2, how he could, get more value. But I think Keenan Allen is a great, safe landing spot for him. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, he complements DJ Moore very well. He's the intermediate guy. He's the one who's going to, get the hook routes. He's going to be the one going inside, outside. And that helps DJ Moore. DJ Moore is going to stretch the field. He's going to be the one for the big plays. And again, this is a great move. And as far as the value goes, I think it only helps whatever quarterback they're going to have in Chicago, most likely Caleb Williams. I think that adds value for Caleb, because Caleb's already going to be everyone's 101 when it comes to the rookie draft, unless you're maybe not in a super flex and you might go like Marvin Harrison. But in most super flex dynasty, you're going 101 to Caleb. And now his value is even better because now you gave him some weapons. So I think it's a great move for him. I do think it affects Keenan when it comes to fantasy perspective, because he was force-fed so many targets in a pass-happy offense in LA, where I don't think Chicago is going to be like that. You got a 3-headed monster back there behind their future quarterback, Swift and Roshan, and you still got Khalil Herbert. Like, I think they're going to run the ball just to help alleviate whether it be Fields or Caleb. So I don't think the target's going to be quite there, but I still think he's valuable. I still think he's going to be a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3 this upcoming season. I do think DJ Moore is still going to be a wide receiver 2 with potential wide receiver 1 capability because of his big plays and touchdowns and stuff. But great move overall. I think it's a better move as an actual NFL move than it is fantasy, but I still think there's some value there. If you're in a win now league, maybe Keenan you might be able to get at a decent price, but I think people are still going to try to sell him high just because of what he's been able to do. And now he's got a team that, potentially has Caleb Williams. So we'll see how that plays out, but I do like the move.
Yeah, good move for sure. And how about the next guy, Marquise Brown? Marquise Brown goes to Kansas City. He's only 26 years old. This is somebody who can stretch the field. I don't think he's exactly Tyreek Hill, coming in there and getting 8 to 10 targets. That's just, to me, not the player he is. I do think he'll get a couple long, big plays per game even. Could be, potential there for a weekly walking bomb. So Marquise Brown, we saw glimpses in Arizona. We saw him have a really nice year in Baltimore. I think, as much as he might not be dependent on as much because they have other guys in Kansas City, I do think he comes up the rankings a little bit to me. And Like I said, he's no Tyreek Hill there. Tyreek Hill's a 1 of 1, but Marquise Brown, when we talk about him and Rashid Rice now is kind of being put on the back burner. A lot of people think Marquise Brown's going to be the step up and be the number 1. Does it even matter who's the number 1, who's the number 2? I mean, I still prefer, to be honest, as of right now, I still prefer Rice. How about yourself?
Yeah, I like Rice a lot. I loved him last season. I was high on him when I was looking at my rookies. I was looking at game film. I loved Rice. I thought he was going to be a great receiver coming into the league. And then you land in Kansas City. You're like, wow, you got the best quarterback in the league. So, and Rice started showing up really well towards the end of the season. Like, he started becoming very consistent. It was starting to click for him. I think this is a great move for Rishi. I don't think it hurts him at all. I think Marquise, actually, it's a good move for Hollywood Brown as well. Hollywood's going to have the opportunity. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to have a quarterback that can get him the ball. I think it's a great move for Patrick Mahomes, great move for Travis Kelce. Like, overall, this helps this offense. Because imagine this team had just Rashee Rice, who really didn't show up till the end. Travis Kelce was up and down last season, even though he still had a very successful season. It's just not the Kelce season that everybody expected. So this is a great move. Again, I'm not jumping that bandwagon. I think some people are like super high on Hollywood Brown right now because, it's back in Kansas City, and you're going to see a timeline on your Twitter. Everyone's going to be talking about it. And I'm like, hey, you go after him. You spend as much as you want on him. But I will tell you, I think this is more value for everyone else around him than it is him specifically. But it's a good move. Again, I don't hate it. I think if you have Hollywood Brown on your team, I think you're happy about this move. I think you're kind of excited. You just got a potential wide receiver 2 on your roster now.
Right. Absolutely. Really good landing spot. Hopefully he stays healthy, and probably somebody who's not going to get, 8 to 10 targets a game. But if he can get that long touchdown, that big 40-yard catch, probably going to have a nice week for you. Right. And it's a good chance to happen every week. Patrick Mahomes likes to air it out, and that's a nice compliment to Rashee Rice. Absolutely. So very good signing there, real life and fantasy. Next guy we'll talk about, Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis, burned a lot of people last year. I bet a lot of people won't even touch him. But me, I'm a little bit different. He's coming to Jacksonville. They lost Ridley. Really, all they have is Kirk. A couple other guys here and there. Parker Washington, I know, out of Penn State. He had a nice end of the year. But to me, I think Gabe Davis, they bring him in for a reason. He's had a good track record in the past. He's young. He's only 24 years old. They signed him in Jacksonville to a 3-year contract. So pretty big investment for Gabe Davis. Are you willing to forgive Gabe Davis for the last year and being just a guy in Baltimore? I know I am, as of right now. If he's the number 2, and Christian Kirk, he's a great receiver, but it's not to me. It's not Christian Kirk's had some injuries of himself. It's not like Gabe Davis is number 3 on the depth chart. I think this is 2 as his floor. I think it could get actually better for Davis than it was in Buffalo. Do you agree, Steve?
So I think I'm more of a wait and see guy just because he has burned me a few times. I'm sure he's burned a lot of people, right? You start him, he doesn't do anything, and you bench him and he freaking goes off for 20, 30 points and you're like, hate this guy. But I will say it's more of a wait and see on my end. I don't hate the move. I think it's going to be a good move for him. My concern that actually is more so not him. It's more so this offensive line for Jacksonville because I watched a lot of Jacksonville Jaguars last season. I was a huge Etienne fan. I was a huge Kirk fan. And watching those games, that offensive line just could not help protect Trevor Lawrence at all. And the one thing I will say with Gabe Davis, he's a great route runner. Not obviously as good as Kirk, but he's going to get open down the field. But if you don't have time to get him, down the field, it's kind of a concern. So they've got to make some improvements there. I think if they can get some depth and some nice rookies in this, this draft, I think that helps and it gives him a little bit more confidence in this. Because Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. I think he's up there and he can potentially still be a top 10. I know some people are kind of jumping that bandwagon now after a few years, but I don't hate the move. I'm more wait and see than I am anything else, but I think he can end up being a really solid play this season. And I think because people are still burned by him, I think he's a great grab in late startups, or if you're talking redraft, you could probably get him pretty late and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's room to grow there. Young guy, 24 years old. So yeah, maybe this is just a starting point for Gabe Davis. There's really high potential there. What could be? Hey, but then on the other hand, it was in Buffalo too. So we'll see who the real Gabe Davis is. Hopefully for the better. Now we'll talk about a guy who left Jacksonville to give Gabe Davis a golden opportunity, and that's Calvin Ridley, 29 years old, got a 4-year contract. So he's going to be paid to his mid-30s with Tennessee. I'm just, I don't like this. I'm hurt the wrong way about this signing. As from a fantasy perspective, I think it helps, Will Levis. And I think that's, the golden ticket out of here. But I don't think it helps Calvin Ridley. I mean, they have DeAndre Hopkins getting just the target hog he is, even to his 30s. He's a high caliber player, elite wide receiver. To me, I just don't see Calvin Ridley really paying off. We were hoping to see more consistency. When it was all said and done, he got his points. He had some really big weeks, especially he helped you out in the playoffs when he was with Jacksonville. So that was nice. But I just don't see consistency still from Calvin Ridley. They had some running back. They signed Tony Pollard. They have Spears. Who knows what they're going to do with running backs? Do they still run the ball a lot? Then you got, Hopkins, who I had mentioned. And also they have what's his name? Traylon Burks. I don't think he's even moved further down the rankings than Ridley, but I think it kind of muddles everything up here for the wide receivers. If you have Hopkins, I don't think you're happy, and if you have Ridley, I don't think you're happy either. Steve, you agree?
Yeah, I think this burns a lot. It hurts Traylon Burks. Anybody who drafted him, a lot of people drafted him in the first round in their rookie drafts. So Burks is somebody that now pretty much is negated at this point. It does affect DeAndre. It definitely affects Ridley because he's got to get accustomed to this new offense. And like you mentioned, you've got Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. Do they continue to run the ball? I know it's a new regime there, so we'll see how they plan on doing that. You mentioned obviously Will Levis is a win in this one because of now you've got all these weapons around him. I'm on the opposite side. I don't think Will Levis is going to last in this league, and I actually think this is a great opportunity to get rid of Will Levis because of the opportunities that are around him. Because now you've got all these weapons. This is the perfect time to sell Willis at a pretty good value where you might get a better turnaround. Where you don't, and again, I could be completely wrong, but everything I've watched of Will Levis, I wasn't sold on him last year. I sold him last year when he had those couple good games with DeAndre, and I moved on, and I don't regret it at all. And I feel like this is an even better opportunity to get rid of Will Levis. But he may surprise me. He may end up being an absolute stud, and this was the turning point. Him, getting Ridley and getting Pollard back there was a turning point. Sure, but I don't think that Ridley is going to really affect anybody in a positive light when it came to this signing. Good for him for getting the bag. He bet on himself, pun intended. He made the opportunity. He got the money, which is great for him. And against a rival, right? A lot of weird rivalry flip flops in these signings. But I just, get rid of him if you can. I'm just not sold on this new move for him.
I get that. Hey, stick to your guns. That's fair. Will Levis, neither of them to me are must-haves. Get them gone, both of them. That's fine. And probably in Dynasty too, a lot of people will be intrigued. Levis is young. Use that as trade bait too. So yeah. I'm cool with that. I could see that too. Moving on to our running backs, we have a lot. This is bread and butter here. We have a lot of shakeups. We have DeAndre Swift first off going to Chicago. He leaves Philly. I thought he was going to resign there. That wasn't the case. He gets a 3-year deal in Chicago. And as much as, he's probably the top dog there off the bat, I just don't see, him paying off to be gaining any ground of where his stock was last year. To me, he's a little bit of a faller, even though he's a starter. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, man, I was such a big Swift guy. I wanted him to be the like what Jahmyr Gibbs is right now for Detroit, and it just never happened. He was just unhealthy. And then you go to Chicago or, Philly, who has an amazing offensive line. And yeah, maybe if he had a few more touchdowns, if they didn't have the tush push, and his value would have been super high and he would have been really successful. But again, even in Philly, with how great that offense could have been or should have been, he didn't pan out to be the guy. And I thought it was amazing how the first signing of free agency was DeAndre Swift to Chicago. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't blame Chicago for going for the move. I think they overpaid because you still have the other two, Roshan and Herbert back there. But like I mentioned before, when we talked about the receivers, I think this is overall a good move for Chicago in getting their potential rookie Caleb weapons and people that to kind of rotate in the backfield. So it's not a bad move in the NFL stance. I don't think it was a good move at all for fantasy. It hurts Herbert, it hurts Roshan, and it hurts Swift. None of them have any value to me at all. I don't even think any of them can really be an RB2, maybe an RB3, depending on who gets the touches the most.
Yeah, and who knows? It could go twofold. Maybe they found their guy. They're like, hey, we tried running a 3-head, even with Diontae Foreman, we tried running a 3-head committee. Yeah. You know, we're done with that. So maybe they could surprise us and, you know, give DeAndre Swift 15 plus carries a game. And Khalil Herbert, I'm just happy that he's kind of like scratched off the board right now. I mean, you were looking to him for passing back, and he didn't do that. And he was getting hurt too. So small guy, it's just, to me, the experiment didn't work. So hopefully they give DeAndre Swift the keys to the car and let him, you know, take off. But yet to be seen. It's OTAs preseason. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, definitely good signing. Next is Tony Pollard from Tennessee, 26 years old. He gets a nice deal and you know, nice starting gig too in Tennessee as that's what we interpret, right? They had Spears there. Now they get Tony Pollard. They paid him. You know, like to say he's a starter, and I do think, you know, he has the track record, and Spears is a little back himself. So I think that the assumption is that Tony Pollard starts, but I don't think this is a better landing spot than Dallas. You know, and a lot of people say Tony Pollard looked down on him like he had such a bad year. It really wasn't stat wise too much off from the year before that. You know, when people think that he clicked. So I just don't, with Tony Pollard, I don't see things getting better than it was in Dallas. I think he's a faller to me. His stock goes down a little bit, especially, you know, what are they going to do with Spears? Is he going to be the third down back? Is, you know, Tony Pollard, I think he had over 50 catches last year. I don't know if that's going to be the case this year with Spears. I'm a little bit scared with Tony Pollard, even though they invested in him and he's still young. To me, it's you know, like we talked about Ridley, Hopkins, who their value is shaken up, but maybe not for the better. And I think Tony Pollard, this is one that's a faller for me. Steve, you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It didn't make any sense at all why Tennessee decided to go after Pollard when you have a back that's very similar skill set. And I think they're both going to be used. I think obviously Pollard gets probably maybe 60% of the touches, right? And the rest goes to Spears. But I don't think this was a good move for him. Good. I mean, again, new regime in Tennessee, so maybe that will change. But just from an outsider perspective, and you're kind of just looking at what happened, and obviously watching him last season, I know a lot of people kind of were down on him, but a lot of people forget he came off of a pretty gruesome broken leg from the playoffs the year before. So I think it took some time for him to kind of get more comfortable and get that full strength. So I do give him the benefit of the doubt there. I think it would have been great had he stayed in Dallas, his value would have been better. It would have been great for him. And I think that Dallas would have gotten a running back anyways in this draft to kind of complement Tony, because I don't think Pollard is that everyday back, and that's not what he does. But, you know, some fool's still going to think Pollard might be the guy, and that's totally understandable. I have Pollard in a couple leagues of mine when it comes to Dynasty, and I'm in a weird spot because I don't want to quite sell him because I know I'm going to get some garbage trades. But I don't know what to do with him. Like, he's in that weird spot. So I'm kind of sitting on him right now, kind of see what's going to happen. You obviously never wish any injuries to any player. I want them to all have healthy seasons, but all it takes is one injury and all of a sudden Pollard's the guy again, getting all the touches. Sure. But how this is going to play out, I don't know. It's a weird one, man. It was such a weird signing.
I agree. You know, and next signing we're going to talk about is Saquon Barkley. You know, 27 years old, went to Philly, 3 years. On one hand, I really like it. Maybe a better, right? Definitely a better team, better line. They do lose Kelsey. Maybe that affects this. That's, you know, one of the reasons why I'm a little bit torn on this. Who knows if it's the same caliber offense and offensive line that we saw last year. I think one thing about Saquon Barkley that I do like is the fact that I don't think they're going to have to, drive him into the ground as much. You know, when he was on the Giants, first off, all you're doing is, if I'm opposing defenses, I'm just stacking the box and eliminating Saquon Barkley out of the game plan and making, the quarterback throw to those receivers. And I just don't think that that's, the case anymore. Maybe he loses some touches, but I don't think you can really focus in on Saquon and say, if we take him out, we win. So I think he, gets a little bit of a disguise. He's in a better offense for fantasy as far as fluidity and consistency. I'd like to see him stay healthy. I think, the fact that he's only 27, I know he's been in this league getting a lot of touches. He has a lot of wear and tear, but he's still only 27. He's an elite athlete. So Saquon Barkley, what I'm looking for here is, maybe he's not getting 20 to 25 touches a game. And while in fantasy, obviously the touches help. Maybe you're prolonging his health. Maybe you're prolonging his season, and you can get more dependability, more consistency. That's what I'm looking for with Saquon going to New York. How about you, Steve?
I am selling Saquon at this point. His value is at his highest, right? Like, you got a guy who's now on his team that everyone's expecting him to be amazing because you've got all these other pieces that are going to be a big factor that defenses have to take account for. So now Barkley's not the only one where he was in New York. You got to give him credit. He did a great job while he could with the horrible offensive line he had in front of him. So he did a great job. But what was valuable about Saquon was his receiving aspect. And if you've watched any of the Eagles in the last couple of years, running backs did not catch the ball a lot. That's not something they do in that offensive scheme. They run the ball, they'll catch a few, but they're not a focal point when it came to that. So now I think that hurts his value because realistically, Hurts is going to throw to AJ. He's going to throw to Goddard. He's going to throw to Devontae. Like, he's going to have those weapons. Saquon is an aftermath. Like, Saquon is the check down every once in a while. Like, that's the type of offense this is. So, and I think losing Kelsey at the center spot is a huge deal. No one's talking about it enough. I think that's going to hurt Philly a lot. It's going to affect Jalen Hurts. It's going to affect how that offensive line plays together, because he made all the calls when it came to blitzes and the protections and schemes. So I think that plays a factor. So for me, if I have Barkley, I am trying to move on from him because I think people will see him as this is a great opportunity, and you probably can get a lot more for him now before the middle of the season. He's still going to be effective, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's a top 12. I think he's a mid RB2. Like, I don't think he's an RB1. He's going to get drafted like an RB1 and redraft. I guarantee you that. Like, he is. Just someone's going to do it. Someone's going to draft him as one of the top running backs because of the potential. And I worry about this whole offense as far as how they played and how they're going to utilize him. He's not going to be the same where he was the only guy when it came to New York.
Right. And they left us on a sour note there in the playoffs, right? Bad run, bad home stretch in the regular season leading up into the playoffs where it didn't go so well for Philly, right? So, yeah, I mean, they have a lot of questions there. A lot of people talking about Kenny Pickett might, start over Hurts. So that's where they're at right now. So as much as you think it's a good landing spot, I agree with Steve. If you can sell, if you can get a king's ransom, somebody's willing to pay that, cash out. Absolutely. Next guy we're going to talk about is Josh Jacobs from going to Green Bay, 26 years old. I think it value, to me, I don't think it can really get any higher. I'm not knocking him down a peg. They lost Aaron Jones. I think Josh Jacobs gets the key to the crib and, rides off in the sunset. He's only 26. I think he's going to be a great play as usual. And I'm excited to see him in Green Bay. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, it was a good move. I thought it was one of the better moves of all the running backs that, left to different teams. I think it was one of the best moves. Again, you went 3 years younger and Josh Jacobs, who was a couple of years removed from being the rushing leader. And on top of that, I think this is only good for a fairly young Packers team, right? You want to be able to run the ball. Now, it's interesting that they got rid of Aaron Jones pretty quickly, but they actually re-signed A.J. Dillon, which I thought A.J. Dillon was actually going to leave. I don't think Dillon affects Jacobs that often. I think Dillon's I'll take a couple plays. If you need to take off, I'll run in there. But like, Dillon did not show enough last year when he had opportunities to really play as the RB1. And he really kind of hurt himself. He just was not effective. So I think it was a great move for Jacobs. Actually really excited for him. And if you can get him, that'd be great. I think he's going to be one of the top backs coming into this season.
Absolutely. Yeah. Big Josh Jacobs guy there. Really, people said he had a down year. He still had a great year in my book. So I'm really excited to see what he does with Green Bay. They had a good stretch run with Aaron Jones there, and I know he left, but maybe that's a good sign of things to come. That for Josh Jacobs, it's going to happen there too. It's going to click. So, like Josh Jacobs a lot. Not falling in the rankings at all. How about the next guy? To me, I'm twisted on him. Gus Edwards. To me, it's strictly an avoid. I'm not, unless you really need a starting running back and he falls late in the draft with, how putrid this offense looks as of right now, the Chargers. I just sometimes when guys leave, it doesn't get better. And I think that's the case here with Gus Edwards. I think that he was a better player in Baltimore. And when they didn't have Derrick Henry, and it was like him and Keaton Mitchell, and, he was getting those goal line looks. I just don't think that he can play well as well as he, grew into be a player and a fantasy player in Baltimore. I just thought that was the peak of it. We'll see for Gus Edwards. I'm not excited. I don't think he's like a 200 plus 225 carry guy. I don't think he's going to last that long. 28 years old. I don't think he can be a bell cow. Steve, do you agree with that?
So this is going to be dependent on how or who they draft, right? As of right now, as far as running backs go, you've got Gus Edwards, Isaiah Spiller, and Josh Kelly. Gus Edwards will be the guy getting 200 plus touches in this offense, especially with how this offense just got torn apart. So as of right now, I like Gus Edwards as a sneaky dark horse coming into the season. Now I'm fully expecting Harbaugh to try to get his boy Corum in the draft. That's my full expectation. I think that's what's going to end up happening, which would then completely remove any value that Gus Edwards has at this moment. But right now, if you have Gus Edwards, he's definitely worth possibly selling because you might get some value out of him. But I will say, as far as any real value, it's all dependent on how this April draft comes, because he may have if they don't go running back, Gus may actually surprise you and become a pretty good running back coming into this season just because of the opportunities and touches. And that's what it comes down to. If he's getting touches, you got to put him in your lineup. But like you mentioned, he hasn't touched the ball a lot in his in the pros. He's had chances and opportunities for Baltimore, and he's done okay, but he's never really wowed you, So, and that's the only hesitation. And in this offense, I don't know. There's nobody that scares you anymore, right? No one's afraid of Quinn Johnston. No one's afraid of Josh Palmer. Man, that whole team just flipped in an instant. So now the value of Gus Edwards just changed a little bit. But as of right now, just because of opportunities, he still has some value.
Right, and I do expect them to get somebody else too. Maybe that's the best. Maybe that's the best situation in as far as NFL for the Chargers is to have that 1-2 punch. Right, you don't want to just be relying on one guy. Don't think they're going to get much out of Spiller. Right at this point, Kelly. I hear people talking about Josh Kelly making that climb. Doing really good in the offseason. Maybe he steps up and he can be 1A or 1B to that. But yeah, I think Gus Edwards can definitely still have some goal line value at least. Not a sexy play, but can definitely have value. I just don't think he's going to be somebody that you want to give the ball, 15, 20 times a game as a running back. I think that he needs somebody to complement him, but he can definitely have value too. And hey, if they don't sign anybody, opportunity is king. Absolutely. So if those touches are there, yeah, he's no longer a sell to me. So it depends on how things shake out. But Gus Edwards, 28 years old, 2-year deal, starter right now. So take heed, pay attention. Let's mention one more running back, probably the biggest one, that we didn't hit yet is Derrick Henry going to Baltimore, 30 years old, 2-year deal. He takes that Gus Edwards spot. And to me, Gus Edwards was really nice there. They used him at the goal line well. And who's better to utilize at the goal line than Derrick Henry? I think that's where, a lot of his value is going to come. And not to say he's, a one-trick pony at this point. I still think for being 30 years old, 29 last year, he could still hit that home run. A lot of guys, in their young 20s can't even hit the home run. So he's still doing it at almost 30 years old, will be 30 this year. I love it, man. I think Derrick Henry, right now they don't have Keaton Mitchell. He's recovering from an ACL injury himself. So Derrick Henry's the guy right now. No matter who comes back, no matter when Keaton Mitchell comes back to complement him, Derrick Henry will be the guy. And I think it's just an overall great great goal line, great, not only passing down, but great first 3 down back. I think Derrick Henry, can do it all. The touches, he's durable. I think as long as he can stay healthy, which, like you said, can happen to anybody. Injuries can happen. You're not hoping on them, but hopefully there's not an injury for Derrick Henry. I really like him in Baltimore this year. Steve, you agree?
Yeah, I think it was a great move. I think anywhere Derrick Henry would have gone would have been a good move because he was clearly going to a team that was a contender, and he was clearly going to be the RB1 on that team. So I think it was a great move. I think that offensive line is really good. You're still afraid of what's going to happen with, Lamar Jackson, with his dual threat capability. So you can't fully focus on just Henry. Like in that backfield, you got to have your eyes looking at, is he going to hand it off? Is Lamar going to run? And that little hesitation that every linebacker has to do to determine if it's going to be Lamar or Derrick is going to be huge. And that's going to only help Derrick Henry. Now, my only concern, and it's kind of a joke, but kind of not, like, man, the running backs have had a health concern in Baltimore for years, right? Everybody was super excited, but Dobbins hurt, right? Dobbins was the guy. He's still there, right? You had injuries to Keaton Mitchell now. You had Gus Edwards, like Justice. I mean, it just goes on. And I don't know if it's a training staff issue. I don't know if it's the field they play on. I don't know what the issue is, but health has been a concern for the Baltimore Ravens. So with that said, as long as he does stay healthy and he does not get that crazy injury bug that they have in Baltimore, man, Derrick Henry is going to absolutely just go crazy this season. I could see him as crazy. I could see him in a half PPR be RB1, like the way this year could finish for him. In full PPR, I still give it to Christian McCaffrey, but in a half PPR, I think there's still a value there for Derrick Henry. And of course, if it's a standard league, Derrick Henry is clear. But man, what a great move for him.
Yeah, I love it. Derrick Henry, I mean, like I said, somebody who can still hit the home run, big guy, a lot of tread on the tires, but still in his 30s, walking bomb at the goal line too, hits on all levels, and I don't expect him to catch many balls. That's not really his facet, but he can still do that when called upon too, right? So they don't really have much healthy options right now to get in his way or really take away at his workload. So Derrick Henry, walking bomb, love it. Finally, let's wrap it up with some tight ends. To me, I don't see much value here. These guys are almost the second stringers. We have one guy that's actually two guys that are first string right now. Actually, all three of them very well could be first stringers. And while I say that, I'm not really excited by any of these guys. It could go both ways. But the first one being Mike Gesicki, signs with Cincinnati, 28 years old. Technically, he's their number one right now. And as much as there's potential in him as an athlete and hyped up as a rookie, I don't know. To me, I know they had Irv Smith last year, didn't really get utilized that much. There was a lot of hype there. We saw Mike Gesicki have a nice rookie year and then kind of fizzle off still to this point. Maybe at 28, there's a resurgence, but me personally, I'm not willing to bank on that. And if I have him, it's probably just a hold right now. Maybe things get better in Cincinnati, but I'm not counting on it with Mike Gesicki. Are you, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, he's in a decent position going to a team that is pass heavy. And you've got a good quarterback in Burrow that, as long as Gesicki gets open, which he's done a really good job, he's a pretty good route runner. He should have some opportunities. He's way too inconsistent to be a starting tight end on your fantasy teams. But maybe if you're streaming a tight end, you got to fill in for a bye week. He's not a bad pickup at this point. You're definitely going to hold them in your dynasty leagues. If you can afford to hold them if you got obviously a light depth roster, like maybe you can't put that many bench players, and I wouldn't be mad at you for getting rid of him. But this is probably one of the better spots for him to land, as far as the signing goes, because there's not a lot of great tight ends that were in this free agency class, because there was a great rookie class that came in. You've got obviously the big name coming in this upcoming April in Bowers, but you need to, and he's out there in waivers. You got to pick him up. Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing, but he hasn't shown enough yet to really put him in my lineup.
Right. So, yeah, good dynasty hold. Maybe not somebody you're targeting as your one tight end in redraft or a startup. Maybe it's, second string, get some security there. Things could spark up for Gesicki. So, yeah, it could definitely go both ways there. Next guy we had talked about on a podcast before. This isn't new news, but it is pretty recent news and warranted to be talked about. Jonnu Smith goes to Miami, 28 years old. I think somebody who's a late bloomer, wasn't in a good landing spot in Tennessee to begin his career. We had a nice year last year, and that was with Kyle Pitts also in front of him in Atlanta. So Jonnu Smith, he was a streamer last year. He's definitely, absolutely, at least a streamer right now. I'm going to pencil him in as a fine back end tight end one right now. I think that he's a great landing spot. He's a good athlete, speedy guy himself. He goes to Miami with Waddle and Tyreek, and on one hand, how many targets can he garner with those two wide receivers? But it's definitely going to open up space for him. So Jonnu Smith, if they can utilize the tight end more, there's not really much in his way. I think they have Durham Smythe, who's maybe more of a blocker tight end at this point. So Jonnu Smith, I mean, I'd like to see that Miami build some rapport, Tua build some rapport with those tight ends, and kind of lessen the load on the wide receivers, the top dogs. But Jonnu Smith, I really like this signing. I think people are going to be surprised by Smith, and I don't think he's somebody who's just strictly a second string, a backup tight end for your fantasy squad. I think this is somebody who can punch into the top 20. Do you agree, Steve?
Yeah, right now I don't think he's squeaked into the tight end one spot for me yet. I'd like to see a little bit more, obviously, this offseason and see training camps and how they actually use him. But he is a very athletic tight end. You saw signs last year where Arthur Smith used him more than they used Kyle Pitts. And honestly, Jonnu did a really good job. He had some really solid plays. There were some times, I had Jonnu in one of my redrafts where he was my starting tight end. And I mean, I was like, this is crazy that I'm having to start him, but he won some games for me. He put up some good amount of points. So he has the opportunity going into this offense where, again, you've got some great receivers on the outside. Tua is not afraid to throw the ball. He threw a lot last season. And I think Jonnu is in a great situation where he could potentially be a top 12 tight end. Right now, I want to see a little bit more of this offseason, but I think this is a great opportunity for him. And he's going to be very cheap for you to grab or, again, pick up right off of waivers.
Absolutely. Jonnu Smith, good hold if you have him right now. If you're in a startup, take heed, grab him. At least it's a second tight end. Price tag is not high on him right now. The last guy we'll talk about, it was Will Dissly, somebody who I don't think got a fair shake. And, I'm going to mention his name for a reason. He goes to the Chargers. Now they could go and draft Bowers and, he could be a backup yet again. But to me, I think at 27 years old, he just hasn't gotten a fair shake this far, to this point in his career. Maybe if he walks out of the draft, the offseason as the tight end number one for the Chargers, I think there could be some hidden value there. We saw Gerald Everett have some nice weeks. Who knows? Maybe right now, as it stands, like we said, Josh Palmer and Quentin Williams are the top two receivers there. They really need somebody else to throw to. Maybe the new coaching, Harbaugh comes in, new regime takes over, and they find more looks for the tight end. Maybe Bowers, right? But if Bowers doesn't go here, Will Dissly, is this somebody who is on your radar too, Steve?
Yeah, just because of right now, the way if you're looking at the depth chart, and if we were to start the season right now, it just opportunities alone gives him a chance to be a solid tight end, right? You've got, like you mentioned, the receiving core is not great for, the Chargers. You've got a potential top 10 quarterback in Justin Herbert. I'm still kind of on him, but, he's got the talent, the ability to be a top 10 quarterback. I am curious how this offense plays out with obviously Jim Harbaugh now in here, but man, Dissly has the chance to get plenty of opportunity if they do not draft a tight end this upcoming season. Right now, currently where they're at, they're probably going to go wide receiver in the first round. Maybe they can get Bowers in the second. We'll see. But Bowers could easily go in the first round, and they don't get the tight end they want. So I am curious how this is going to play out. I do like this move for Dissly, because I think, he's underrated. He doesn't get a lot of opportunities. He's shown a couple flashes here and there. He's got some good hands. He's a good blocker. He's got a potential chance to, if he's the starter, he's going to get 50 to 70 targets his way, which will put him as a good starting tight end.
Absolutely. So keep an eye on Will Dissly. Don't forget about him yet. And not somebody who's a trade for. Let's see what happens in the offseason, right? But as it stands right now, if that's who they're rolling out on week one, definitely Will Dissly can have himself a nice season, be a nice surprise for fantasy managers out there. So absolutely. We're going to talk about defense next episode. Looking forward to that. There's going to be a lot more moves, I'm sure, even tonight that are going to happen, right? So it's a wild offseason, a wild time. But those were some guys that we think that we highlighted that maybe a little bit overlooked. Obviously, the running backs, there were some really big names we talked about and not being overlooked, but we just wanted to reiterate them too. So thank you for listening. Steve, is there anything else you wanted to say before we sign off?
No, again, make sure you guys, sign up for IDP Plus. Make sure you guys hit that mock draft for that free dollar opportunity into there. We've got a lot of great articles. We've got a lot of great content. Check out our other podcasts. I know Johnny has been in a lot of amazing podcasts for this channel and really putting out some great content. Make sure you follow us on X. Again, we give you our inputs and maybe our stupid thoughts throughout the day as well to kind of entertain you. So make sure you guys are following us there. Again, follow us on IDP Plus. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel as well, or Spotify, or however you're getting your content. I'm just excited. I'm ready for this draft. I can't wait to get here.
And I can't wait to talk defense next week, man. Back to the research. Let's see, let the pieces fall where they are, and we'll see you back in 1 week. Steve, thank you very much. All you viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in. I am at Johnny Freakin F1. He is at AVG Joes _FF. Thank you. Bless up, and we will see you next time.